Hello painters, so once again I have my rooster image ready for the second step on the interior drawing spaces, because you'll hear me say it a lot, but that first bit of the drawing is very loose, very light, sort of more of a gesture, and then you do sort of a second round of drawing on top of that, which then goes a little bit more in detail and depth and gets things a little more accurate. So as you can see, I've got my reference image on my computer in front of me, just like you will, and I'm just going to go into all of the spaces, working in very much the same order, still using the grid, looking for where I need to make any changes in the beak, the red areas, the eyes, the little white stuff around his neck, so on and so forth. Once I get all of that done, then my next step is going to be to erase my grid lines and then do one more look through at my drawing based on my reference image, mostly just from observation, since my grid lines will be erased at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and just come in here. So this needs to be a smidge higher up. And there may be some parts that you don't change much at all, and that's fine. So the beak is higher at this point, and then comes out. And definitely do not erase your sort of incorrect lines until you have made enough of the correction that you know that you won't accidentally make the same line. So now that I've corrected both of those parts of the beak and I know it's accurate, I can go ahead and erase that. My incorrect lines, that is. But I don't want to do that until I'm to the point where I've made my correction and I know that I won't accidentally repeat the mistake. So it comes down and then over. So this is where you get nitpicky. You're really looking for the little corrections you can make that will make a big difference, even though they're small. I'm also going to add some more details. As you can see, I'm starting to add a little bit more information to the beak, so that I know a little bit more of what each part is. And keep in mind, right here, he looks very much like he's frowning. So I just want to go ahead and throw out the idea that if you want to sort of emphasize the mood and the emotion that your animal seems to have, that's absolutely fine, completely a good option. But you don't necessarily have to. You can just focus on making it as accurate as you want to and as accurate as you can. But if you would like to kind of play around with increasing the emotion or the mood that that animal seems to be portraying, you definitely do have that option as well during this project. So again, just erasing those lines once I've already corrected areas. And again, adding more detail to the beak wherever I can, just because the more line that I have telling me where things go, the easier it's going to be when I go to paint. So I'm not shading with my pencil, I'm mostly just kind of drawing where the values might change, where there might be lines that I need to be aware of, and different things like that. Essentially, the main point here is to draw as much information as you think you will need to make your painting as successful as you can. It's going to be a little bit different for each person, and that's perfectly fine. So this is going to come over a little bit more and then down. And then I can go ahead and erase that sort of initial line there once I've corrected it. There's a little gap in his beak here, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that in just to remind myself it's there. So now that might be pretty much all that I would need to change and correct on the beak portion. So then I'm going to go through the red areas above his beak and below his beak in very much the same way. And I'm going to do the same thing on the eyes. I'm not going to do it as much on the feathers of the face, but I will a little bit. Most of the detail and the texture of the feathers I'm going to be doing more with the paint. So I'm not crazy worried about the feathers right now. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and move into the red area below his beak here. Just making things a little bit more exact and precise. There's a pretty big highlight there, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that in. This comes out a little bit more, almost straight over, and then comes down. And there's another really large highlight here. I'm going to go ahead and sort of indicate where that would be. You don't necessarily have to draw where the highlights are, but sometimes it can help. A lot of times I'll just draw the line on one side of the highlight. So like for instance right here, the highlight is here, but I'm just going to draw the line between the shadow and the highlight, not between the edge and the highlight. So it really just depends on what helps you the most. So once again, just kind of going through. This actually starts higher up and then comes down and out a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that. So as you can see, some changes are big, some are small. But all of them, no matter how big or small, are very important at this point because you're making things more accurate. And that's your goal. So then this comes just kind of off the page on my grid. So I'm just going to kind of finish it up. Or I could just bring it off the page. On this side it looks like it goes lower, so I'll just bring it completely off the page most likely. But on this side I can tell that it ends, or would end, right down here somewhere. So I can just kind of make that up based on what I know about roosters. Just because I've drawn them before. And this part of the red comes out from there. And comes up here a little bit more. I'm going to erase that spot. I'm going to go ahead and work on the white section here just while I'm in this area. So that's an area where the feathers of his cheek or whatever, neck, I don't really know, go sort of around this white area. Which comes down a little straighter in here and then dips down and up and comes over a little bit more sharply. Now I'm going to go ahead and look at this inside line. You'll also see that my lines do tend to get a little bit darker at this point because I'm making correct lines. I'm changing things and making things as accurate as I can. You still want to make sure that you're not making them too dark, especially if you plan on using watercolor. Now, I will say on that note, a lot of people do tend to use pen and ink and watercolor together, so they would be outlining parts of this and then going in with watercolor. A lot of times that would be okay, but for this particular project, I am more interested in seeing what you can do with just the paint itself. So if we need to add outlining toward the end, we will, but we will not start out with outlining. And this one actually comes over a lot more and then comes down, so I had the angle on that part wrong. And then this part comes out pretty wide. And again, there's a highlight sort of under this part, so this curve here is very important. And comes out just a little bit more. So that's a slightly more accurate curve there. And this part once again comes down, and it might actually stop down here. So instead of bringing off the page, I'm just going to kind of have it stop right here. This is going to get just a little higher up. So there I've done my sort of second go on the beak and these red lines and part of the neck. Going to finish this part of the neck, move into the eyes, the red thing up top. So this comes out a little bit more and then comes in, so it's more of an angle here. And then it actually comes across and then down. And then this other part of the white kind of wraps into it. And this is very much the same. It's going to come down a little lower. So I'm not necessarily going to talk a whole lot more while I'm finishing the accuracy drawing steps here, but I do want you guys to remember that once I finish with the accuracy steps, my next thing is to erase the grid line and then just eyeball it all, make sure that it looks visually correct based on looking at your reference image, make sure that it makes sense to you when you are looking at your reference image. Because even though the grid is a really great technique to help you get things accurate and look for the proportions, your brain and your eye are still sort of the final say-so. So once you finish with all of the gridded parts of the drawing and you feel like it's as accurate as you can get it, then you erase the grid lines and use your eyeballs and your brain to make sure that it is actually as accurate as you can.